Where does time go? Seriously, it feels like only yesterday that this lot were planted, and now look at it all. Hi, I'm Ben, and if you're alarmed at the speed with which summer seems to be racing by, please don't fret, you haven't missed out. We'll be starting off some healthy greens, sowing some ravishing roots, before planting some veggies that'll be cropping well into winter and on into next spring. It's sow time! Let's start with some leafy greens, luscious salad leaves to keep the salad bowl full well into the autumn. Now I'm sowing here a non-hearting or loose leaf mix of lettuce, and they're just going about less than half an inch or about a centimetre deep. Now the weather here isn't too hot at the moment, but if you're having a very hot spell or in a hot climate, make sure to sow maybe in the evening once things have cooled off a bit, and water with very cool, chilled water so that we don't overheat these seeds. You might also benefit from covering the seeds over with a plank of wood to shade the area, or some sort of shade netting, something just to keep the area nice and cool. Once you're sown, cover them up, and of course we'll give them a thorough water as well. I'll also want to be sowing some hardy winter lettuces to enjoy over the winter months. I'm going to sow those in a couple of weeks' time, and I'll sow them into plug trays to grow on and then plant out. Some will go into the greenhouse, others out here into the raised beds, and I'll space them about a foot or 30 centimetres apart in both directions. Then once the weather turns cold, I'll set up my temporary cold frames, very simple to do, to keep the lettuces out here nice and cosy. Now other greens you can sow now include all of the Asian greens like pak choi, they're just fab. And for more ideas for sowing luscious leaves to grow on to enjoy over autumn and winter, do check out our videos on those, and I'll pop links to them down below. And now for some roots. These should be in and out before temperatures take a dive for winter, though many will happily sit through the winter to be there for when you need to use them. I'm going to be sowing 4 roots in this bed: a main crop carrot, a last sowing of beets or beetroot, some radishes and some beautiful turnips. Now this area was recently vacated by some potato plants, so what I'm doing now is sowing what's called a follow-on or succession crop. It means we're essentially getting 2 harvests from this bed in one growing season, which is really great. Now I added some compost to this area right at the start of the year for those potatoes, which are hungry crops. There should be enough nutrients in there, but because it's quite lumpy still, I've just added another little load of compost, and then just to be double sure, I'm going to add a sprinkling of blood, fish and bone. This is an organic general purpose fertiliser, and it will really give those roots a thorough boost. First on the list are the carrots, and I'm going to sow a couple of rows here, about a foot or 30 centimetres apart, and just make a shallow drill like that. That just means a small trench in which we can sow. Now carrot seeds are really quite tiny, so we want to be nice and careful with sowing these so they're not too dense. Ideally we want to avoid thinning the seedlings, which means pulling out the excess seedlings, so that we're just leaving everything to grow on. And the reason for that is that every time you thin the seedlings, you create a bit of a carrot smell, which attracts carrot flies to the area, which can damage the roots. So we want to avoid that if possible. That being said, this late in the summer, there are many fewer carrot flies around, which means that we should get away with this pest altogether. I've given the carrots a good thorough watering. Now what I'm going to do is just cover the sown area over with this thick netting. This will help to keep the soil nice and cool and moist. It's really important in a hot summer to do this because carrots really like a nice cool moist environment to germinate, so this will help improve germination success. In my climate it's not so much of an issue, but if you're in a hot climate I'd say it's an absolute must. This here is an earlier crop of carrots, and I've just pulled some up here. The carrots I've just sown, many of them I will harvest young and fresh as baby salad carrots, but the majority I'll just leave to grow on to lift as and when needed throughout the winter. And now to sow our beets or beetroot. and I want to show you the seeds here. They're quite chunky seeds, which makes them very easy to space out individually, so do that. So an interesting fact for you, what I've got in between my fingers here isn't a seed, but a seed capsule containing a number of seeds. So when you sow these, you'll often get a little cluster of seedlings popping up. Now you can do two things here. You can let them grow on to form a little cluster of roots, or you can just thin them out to leave one seedling from each position. I prefer slightly smaller roots because I think they're easier to manage and they've got a better texture. But if you want bigger roots, then you can just thin them out to leave just the one seedling. I'd be interested to know what you reckon, so do drop me a comment below and let me know what you think. Big beets or small beets? The roots will be harvested once they reach the size of about a golf ball. Now this variety I'm sowing here is pretty hardy, so I'm going to leave it where it is throughout the winter to harvest as needed. But if it does turn really cold and the ground freezes solid, I'll lift them all up, pack them into breathable boxes of damp sand or old potting mix, then move them into the outbuilding where it is frost-free to enjoy as and when they are needed. And now for a row of radishes. And I'm going to be sowing a French breakfast type, which has a little white tip to the root. Looks really attractive, and they're slightly longer, so I reckon you're getting more root for your money, as it were. I have real problems with radishes sown earlier on in the summer when the days are still lengthening. It seems to encourage them to bolt. That's when they flower prematurely, which makes the roots kind of tough and inedible. Later on in the summer though, with temperatures cooling down and the days shortening, they really don't do that. So we'll get a much more reliable crop this way. Radishes are great because they grow so fast. They can grow from seed to harvest within about 4 weeks, which means you can slot them here and there wherever there's a gap, which makes them very convenient indeed. As well as these summer radishes, you could now be sowing winter radishes like mooli or daikon. Those radishes have a lovely, long, slender white root that's really crunchy and can be used in cooking. It's got a beautiful crunch and a lovely, gentle, peppery tang to it. Then last for our roots, but certainly no means least, are the turnips. I think turnips can be a bit of an underrated vegetable, but it's well worth growing because you're getting 2 harvests for the effort of 1. The roots, of course, and then those leafy turnip tops, which are great stir-fried. Just like radishes, these can tend to bolt or go to flower prematurely earlier on in the summer, but sow them now and you've got none of that problem at all. Get them covered over, and then once they germinate, I will thin them out in stages to about 9 inches or 23 centimetres apart. That way we'll get those good, decent sized roots. If you live in a warm climate, you may be able to sow many last-minute summer staples. Here we have quite a late first frost date in about early November. That's great, but the weather does cool off considerably by late summer, so even though we won't get frosts, the weather just isn't really warm enough for those warm season crops like zucchini or courgettes, tomatoes, beans and so on. So if you are going to sow those and you have got time, then select an early variety that's fast maturing. Many seed packets will tell you how many days it takes from a crop to go from seed all the way through to harvest, and you can use that information along with your first frost date to work out whether you can grow something. So let's say I've got 90 days until my first frost and something takes 75 days from seed to maturity. Well, I've obviously got plenty of time to grow it. So you might be able to grow something like dwarf beans, for example, but only of course if you do get reliably warm weather all the way up to your first frost date. The garden planner actually adjusts all of your sowing and planting dates according to where you are based on your first and last frost date. If we go to the filters here, I can actually look at crops that I can sow or plant in a particular month. So we're in August now, and look, it's filtered the selection bar to show all of those crops that are ideal for sowing this late in summer. And now to sow some super hardy winter vegetables. Some of these will crop during the colder months, but others will carry on well into spring, filling what we call the hungry gap. That's when the winter crops are over, but the newly sown summer season crops haven't yet found their feet. So these are really handy vegetables to be growing. I'm going to be sowing some winter hardy spinach, some chard and some spring cabbages. I'm sowing my chard into these plug trays here. Now they could be sown directly outside, there's no problem with that. The reason I'm starting them off in plug trays is simply because the ground I want to plant them in is currently occupied. Once those zucchini or courgettes are over, the space will be freed out and these can be planted out about a foot or 30 centimetres apart. I'm just filling the plug tray up and then making a slight depression with my finger and sowing a couple of seeds into each hole, and then I will thin them out to leave one seedling in each place. And as I say, these will go about a foot or 30 centimetres apart. And what about spring cabbages? Well, I'm going to sow them into a pot here. Again, you could sow them outside in a bed and then transplant them, but what I like about sowing them into a pot is that once the seedlings are up, they will then go into their own plug to grow on, and that way I know I'm definitely getting one seedling per plug, and it just keeps everything neat and tidy. And by sowing into a pot first, it's also quite economical on space. These will go out in about a month's time once the tomatoes are finished. Now I'm just going to grow these on in the greenhouse, but you could grow them anywhere you have space, even outside. It's just growing them like this means you can start them off away from the main growing areas and then double up your space essentially, so that while one crop is finishing off, you've got the other one starting. It makes a much more efficient use of your total area. If you live in a hot climate, then you might want to germinate these cool season vegetables indoors in the cool of the air conditioning. Then once they're up, gradually acclimatise them to outdoor conditions, perhaps initially keeping them somewhere shaded before planting them into their final positions. Keep the soil moist and offer additional shade if necessary until temperatures start to cool down again in the autumn. The spinach I'm going to sow direct here. Now this, as I said, is a hardy variety, and once it comes up I will thin out the seedlings. The seedlings I'll use in salads, like a salad leaf, and then those that remain will grow significantly bigger and give big glossy leaves which I can then cut to wilt or steam or indeed stir fry. Now, like many cool season crops, sowing later in summer is a lot better because they'll be far less likely to bolt, and the same goes for chard that we've just sown as well. Now is also a great time to plant autumn planting onions, also known as Japanese onions because they were bred in Japan. Now these onions can be sown now or started from sets, which are tiny immature bulbs, and they will sit through the winter and then give an extra early crop late in the spring or early next summer. Now I'm not going to do that because I've had downy mildew here, and I'm worried about keeping onions growing year round because then the disease might overwinter and infect next year's crop. But if you've not had that as a disease in your garden, it's well worth giving a try. You also might like to try green onions or salad onions to overwinter for a spring crop too. Make sure it's a hardy variety though. Something I'm definitely going to be planting now are these summer planting potatoes. Now you can find these in some garden stores, and if you do, get hold of them, because what they'll do is they will give you a crop of potatoes later on in the autumn, even maybe for your Christmas dinner. So just like normal seed potatoes, they've got shoots coming out the top, and you want to plant them with the most shoots facing upwards. So let's get them into the pot. This has got a 4-inch or 10 centimetre layer of potting mix in the bottom, and I'm planting about 3 seed potatoes in this pot, which is 14 inches or 35 centimetres in diameter. And then simply cover the potatoes over with a little more of the potting mix. This now needs a really good thorough watering, and when the leaves come through, I will keep on adding more potting mix until I get to the top of the container, and then I will keep it nice and moist. And once the temperatures begin to cool off, move this pot to somewhere sheltered. This will be going inside a greenhouse to keep it frost free. Fingers crossed, we'll have some beautiful, delicious, fresh young potatoes from about late autumn into early winter. In my part of the world, it's a little bit late now to be sowing winter brassicas like kale or hardy sprouting broccoli, but you may well find these as young plants for sale, and if you do, snap them up to plant. I started these kale off about a month ago and they're now good, sturdy young seedlings and are ready to plant. So let's do that. This is a really hardy variety. It's another Cavolo Nero kale that will sit throughout the winter to give beautifully crinkly leaves as they're needed. But if you have run out of time to sow and you can't find young plants for sale, well, don't despair. You can sow varieties just for salad leaves, to grow as salad leaves. And a really lovely variety I especially recommend for that is red Russian kale, which has really stunning pink kind of wavy leaves. With it all planted and watered, I'm just going to finish off with a covering of this insect mesh, because it's still peak pest time for brassicas and we don't want them getting chewed up by caterpillars or, say, flea beetle. And finally, don't forget that now's a great time to be sowing hardier leafy herbs like cilantro or coriander or parsley. And with all of our late season crops that grow on into winter, remember you can easily extend the growing season simply by covering them up. You can use sturdy row covers for this, cloches or mini tunnels, or by simply growing these vegetables in a hoop house or greenhouse. By simply doing this, you can extend the growing season by as much as 4 weeks, while making spring start up to 5 weeks earlier. Not bad. There's absolutely loads to be sowing and planting right now. I hope you're feeling inspired to raid the seed box and get on and sow. Next episode, we'll be revisiting the strawberry patch to grow even more plants, because you can never have enough strawberries, right? Please do join me for that one, and if you are a regular here and haven't yet subscribed, well, what are you waiting for? Smash that subscribe button and then mosey on over and give that little notification bell a ding dong as well. In the meantime, happy gardening, and I will catch you next time.